The silence in the command center of the Vanguard was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the ship's engines as they glided toward the uncharted expanse of Galactic Empire space. Admiral Sarah Hunt stood at the front of the room, her eyes fixed on the holographic map of the galaxy, where the blue and gold dots of human-controlled sectors flickered in contrast to the dark void beyond. The fleet, a modest force of human warships, was far smaller than the Empire's immense, towering ships. But size had never been humanity's strength. The human fleet, led by Sarah's own flagship, Vanguard, was agile, swift, and, most importantly, unpredictable. They had survived countless battles, relying not on overwhelming firepower but on tactical brilliance, and the raw will to fight for survival. "Admiral," Captain Julia Vance's voice broke through the tension in the room. "We're approaching the border. Empire territory is within range." Sarah didn't flinch, her gaze still locked on the map. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing against her chest, but she held steady. She had been in tough situations before, but this was different. The Empire was not just a rival, they were a force that had crushed entire civilizations. And now, for the first time, humanity would stand toe-to-toe with them. She knew the Empire's arrogance. The moment they entered their space, they would expect the humans to turn back, to retreat in fear. But not this time. This time, the humans had a message to send, and they weren't going to do it by running. "Have all ships on standby," Sarah ordered, her voice calm but firm, betraying no hint of the uncertainty that stirred beneath her composed exterior. "No mistakes. This is our moment." Captain Vance nodded, her hands moving over the tactical console, relaying orders to the fleet. The crew responded immediately, their movements a synchronized dance of efficiency, each ship locking into its position within the formation. Outside, the dark void of space stretched on endlessly, a cold, silent expanse that seemed to mock their arrival. "We know what we're up against," Sarah murmured under her breath, her eyes narrowing as she observed the holographic display of the Empire's space. The Empire controlled vast swaths of territory, each system a jewel in their crown. To them, humanity was nothing more than a fleeting annoyance, a species that had dared to challenge their might. But the humans had proven time and time again that they wouldn't back down from a fight. The odds didn't matter. They had come this far, and they were not turning back now. The Vanguard sensor system blinked to life, highlighting the massive, heavily fortified star systems ahead. Each Empire planet was a fortress, and their warships an extension of that power. The sheer size and presence of the Empire's fleet were enough to intimidate most, but not Sarah, not her crew. They had faced worse before, being outgunned, outnumbered. It was just another day in the life of humanity's rise. "Admiral," Lieutenant Theo Ramirez's voice crackled through the comms, cutting into Sarah's thoughts. "We're receiving a transmission. It's from the Empire." Sarah raised an eyebrow, intrigued but not surprised. The Empire was notorious for its arrogance. They wouldn't waste a moment to remind the humans of their inferiority. "Put it through," she said, straightening up. A chill ran down her spine as the cold, regal voice of the Empire's commander echoed through the ship's speakers. "This is Grand Emperor Zvaris of the Galactic Empire." The voice was smooth, condescending. "You are intruding upon sovereign Empire territory. Leave now, or face the consequences of your insolence." The crew in the room stiffened, their eyes flickering between Sarah and the screen. Sarah stood motionless, her expression unreadable as she took in the arrogance of the voice that had just spoken. Grand Emperor Zvaris. The name alone carried weight. He was one of the oldest, most powerful beings in the galaxy, known for his ruthless efficiency and unparalleled military prowess. The Empire had crushed every rebellion, every resistance, with brutal precision. They had never met an enemy who dared stand up to them. "We're not here to leave." Sarah's voice cut through the air, steady, unwavering. "We're here to stay. Your territory, your rules, those days are over." The transmission went silent, leaving an eerie pause that felt as heavy as the weight of the Empire's power. Then, a low, mocking chuckle came through the comms. "You misunderstand, Admiral. I do not believe you understand the power you face." This is not a dispute you can win. This is the Empire. You will be crushed. Sarah allowed a brief, knowing smirk to play on her lips. She had heard it all before. Every new enemy underestimated humanity. They saw them as a passing phase, something to crush, a mere nuisance. And yet, time and time again, humanity had proved them wrong. We'll see about that, she said coldly, her voice ice-cold but filled with intent. We don't retreat, Svaris. We never have. The transmission abruptly ended, and for a moment the room was silent. The crew waited, holding their breath. The calm before the storm was always the hardest. Every officer aboard the Vanguard knew the risks. A battle with the Empire would be catastrophic, and they were outgunned by a wide margin. But they also knew that humanity's strength didn't lie in their size or technology. It lay in their ability to fight through adversity, to never back down, no matter the cost. Captain Vance turned from her console, meeting Sarah's gaze. You're sure about this? She asked quietly, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Sarah met her eyes without hesitation. We don't have a choice. If we turn back now, we prove them right. If we press forward, we make a statement. Humanity doesn't bow to anyone. A beat of silence passed, and then Vance nodded, her face hardening with resolve. Let's show them who we are. All ships are ready, Admiral. Ramirez called out from his station. Shields up, weapons at the ready. Sarah turned back to the main display, her eyes never leaving the horizon of the Empire's territory. She couldn't afford to hesitate. This was the moment humanity would either rise or fall. But she knew one thing for certain: they were not going to be crushed. Deploy the fleet in a standard wedge formation, Sarah commanded, her voice sharp. Hold steady. Let's show them just how wrong they are. The silence of space was shattered by the hum of the Vanguard's engines as it moved deeper into the heart of the Empire's territory. The human fleet, now spread out in a tightly organized formation, had crossed the threshold into the Empire's domain. The vastness of the Empire's territory stretched out before them like an endless ocean, a dark and foreboding presence that seemed to swallow the stars. But it was not the stars that Admiral Sarah Hunt was concerned with. It was the power looming on the horizon. Admiral! Lieutenant Ramirez's voice came through the comms, breaking the stillness. We've detected the Empire's fleet. They're massing at the far side of the sector. They're preparing to engage. Sarah glanced at the tactical map. Hundreds of lights blinked across the display, indicating the positions of the Empire's ships. Even from this distance, the sheer scale of the Empire's military might was apparent. Massive warships, larger than anything humanity had ever built, drifted into position like ancient titans. For a moment, the weight of the situation settled in the pit of Sarah's stomach. She had prepared for this moment her entire career. She had led her fleet through every conceivable challenge: pirate raids, alien invasions, skirmishes with hostile factions, but this was different. This was the Galactic Empire. The empire that had swallowed countless civilizations whole. She knew that humanity was outmatched. They were smaller, their ships less advanced, their technology decades behind the Empire's. But what the Empire didn't understand, what they couldn't predict, was the one thing that had allowed humanity to survive so long: their adaptability. They think they can intimidate us, Sarah muttered under her breath, her gaze focused on the looming presence of the Imperial fleet. But we'll show them what happens when you underestimate humanity. Captain Vance approached Sarah's side, her eyes scanning the tactical readouts. They're not even hiding their arrogance. They think we'll retreat at the sight of them. Sarah nodded. The Empire's pride was both their strength and their weakness. For centuries, they had crushed every opponent under the weight of their overwhelming power. The moment they spotted the human fleet, they expected a swift and easy victory. The humans would either run or be obliterated. But the humans had something the Empire didn't: they had nothing to lose. And that, Sarah knew, was their greatest advantage. Deploy the decoys, Sarah ordered, her voice steady. And get our cloaking devices online. We're going to make them think we're retreating. The command was met with quick compliance. Hidden within the depths of the human fleet, small drones activated their cloaking systems, turning them into little more than flickers of shadow. The decoys were simple, nothing more than holographic projections designed to confuse, mislead, and disrupt. They wouldn't fool the Empire for long, but that wasn't the point. The goal was to disorient them, throw them off balance long enough to create an opening. The Empire's first response. The Empire's fleet moved in like a tidal wave, massive ships sweeping across the stars in flawless formation. Their flagship, the dreadnought Elysium, a gargantuan warship with its gleaming black hull, led the charge, its engines glowing like twin suns. Sarah watched as the Empire's fleet closed in, their formations so perfect that it almost seemed like they were marching in a parade, unaware that they were stepping into a trap. "This is too easy," Captain Vance commented dryly, her fingers moving over the tactical console, preparing the fleet for the next phase. "Are they really going to fall for this?" "They will," Sarah said, her eyes narrowing. "The Empire has always been predictable. They believe in their firepower, their size, their ability to crush anyone who stands in their way. But we're not going to fight them on those terms." The first salvo from the Empire came as expected. A barrage of laser beams and plasma projectiles erupted from their ships, slamming into the decoys. In an instant, a dozen decoys were obliterated in flashes of light. It was a beautiful display of power, one that sent a ripple of satisfaction through the Empire's fleet. "They've taken the bait," Lieutenant Ramirez called out, watching the decoys disintegrate one by one. "Empire ships are splitting off to chase them." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. It was working. The Empire's focus was shifting to the decoys, and the human fleet, cloaked and hidden, began to shift into position. The Empire had underestimated the humans once again. Humanity's unpredictable strike. "Now," Sarah commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Engage evasive maneuvers. Target their left flank. Move fast, no hesitation." In response, the human fleet surged forward, breaking their cloaking for just a moment to slip into a new formation. The Empire, still engaged with the decoys, had left an opening, a gap in their defenses that no one could have predicted. Sarah watched as the human ships darted into the gap, the sharp, sleek warships cutting through space with deadly precision. The Empire, now realizing their mistake, tried to regroup, but the human fleet was already on them. The first strike was a success. Laser fire ripped through the Empire's lines, taking out one of their smaller frigates and leaving a smoking wreck in space. "We've got their attention now," Captain Vance remarked, her eyes scanning the battlefield. The Empire's flagship, the dreadnought Elysium, turned toward the source of the attack, its massive guns swiveling into position. The Empire's fleet, now aware that the humans were not retreating but engaging with speed and agility, began to close ranks. "Brace for impact," Sarah muttered, her fingers moving over the console, monitoring the fleet's movements. "We've made our point. Now let's see if they can keep up." The Empire's growing frustration. As the battle intensified, the Empire began to realize that humanity wasn't behaving like any enemy they had ever encountered. The human fleet was small, but they moved with a grace and precision that bewildered the Empire's massive ships. Every strike, every maneuver, seemed to come out of nowhere. "They're unpredictable," the Imperial commander muttered, watching the human fleet dart in and out of their defenses, delivering precise strikes before vanishing again into the vastness of space. "How are they doing this?" A series of blasts from the Empire's warships rang out, but the human fleet had already scattered, like ghosts in the night. The Empire's commanders began to grow frustrated, their precision faltering as they tried to track the erratic movements of the humans. "We're not retreating." Sarah's voice cut through the calms again, steady and confident. "We're just getting started." The Empire's overconfidence was beginning to crumble. They had assumed that the human fleet would be an easy target. But now, they were starting to question their own superiority. The first signs of fear flickered in the Imperial commanders' voices. Their fleet was beginning to fragment, trying to chase the humans across the battlefield, but never quite catching up. Sarah glanced at Captain Vance, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "We'll show them." Let's turn the tables. The calm before the storm. The Empire, now in disarray, regrouped quickly, realizing that humanity was not to be underestimated. Sarah knew that the real battle was just beginning. She watched the Empire's fleet as it slowly began to adapt, tightening their formations and preparing for a counterattack. But Sarah was already thinking ahead. She knew the key to defeating the Empire wasn't in brute strength, it was in keeping them off balance. And that's exactly what she intended to do. We need to keep them guessing, she said quietly. We can't let them get comfortable. We don't fight their way. We fight ours. Her crew, battered and bruised but resolute, readied themselves for the next wave. The fight was far from over, but Sarah had the upper hand. Humanity was still standing, and they would make sure the Empire never forgot it. Prepare for the next phase, she said, her voice a low whisper of determination. We're just getting started. The first wave of fire from the Empire hit hard, a barrage of plasma and energy blasts that cut through the dark expanse of space. The immense warships of the Empire loomed ahead like ancient titans, their guns roaring with unrelenting fury. Yet, despite the overwhelming size and firepower of the Imperial fleet, the human warships, smaller and more agile, moved like shadows, darting through the void with a speed that confused and unsettled the Empire. Here it comes, Sarah muttered under her breath, her eyes locked on the tactical display. The Empire's first wave slammed into the decoys, obliterating them in a flash of light. The human fleet, meanwhile, remained elusive, slipping between the larger warships, evading the Empire's barrage with uncanny precision. Shields holding, Captain Vance reported, her voice steady despite the intensity of the incoming fire. They're still following the decoys. Sarah's plan was working. The decoys, while simple in design, had successfully lured the Empire's attention away from the human fleet, buying precious moments. The Empire had fallen for the trap, scattering their ships across the battlefield to chase after the false targets. In that chaos, the human fleet struck. Deploy the drones, Sarah ordered. Time for the next move. From the shadows of the human fleet, a new wave of cloaked drones appeared. These were no ordinary decoys. They were equipped with sensors, capable of sending false signals to the Empire's sensors, adding further confusion to the battlefield. The drones scattered in every direction, creating a swarm of phantom targets that further disoriented the Empire's advanced tracking systems. The Empire's flagship, the dreadnought Elysium, fired first, sending a massive barrage toward one of the drones. The explosion that followed lit up the dark expanse of space, sending ripples of light across the battlefield. But the drones kept coming, their ghostly signals pulling the Empire's ships in multiple directions. Good, Sarah said, her voice a quiet satisfaction. Now let's see how they handle this. The Empire's confusion. Admiral, they're all over the place. Lieutenant Ramirez called out from his station, his eyes wide in disbelief. The Empire's fleet is breaking formation. They're chasing after decoys and drones, losing their cohesion. It was exactly what Sarah had hoped for. The Empire, so used to fighting with overwhelming strength, was struggling with a new kind of warfare, one built on confusion, misdirection, and agility. They thought they could intimidate us with size, Sarah said, her eyes narrowing. But now they see that size isn't everything. It's how you fight that matters. Captain Vance gave a sharp nod. We're not done yet, though. They're still too strong. Let them underestimate us, Sarah replied, her voice cold. We're about to show them something they've never seen before. The Empire, now more scattered and vulnerable, attempted to regroup. But their rigid tactics, their reliance on overwhelming firepower, were beginning to show cracks. As the Empire's ships realigned, trying to form a new defense, they were met with unexpected resistance from the human fleet. Sarah's ships had moved quickly, striking where the Empire was weakest, at the edges of their defensive perimeter. The human warships struck hard and fast, aiming for the vulnerable points in the Empire's formation. Target their communications arrays, Sarah ordered, watching as her fleet launched a precise volley of missiles. The first strike hit its mark, cutting through the Empire's communication lines and throwing their command structure into chaos. "We've got their communications," Ramirez reported, his voice tinged with excitement. "They can't coordinate anymore." The Empire, once so sure of its dominance, was now caught off guard. For the first time, their communication systems were disrupted, and their once immense fleet seemed less cohesive. The human fleet, small and agile, had created an opening, a chink in the Empire's armor, turning the tide. "No," Sarah said quietly. "Let's finish what we started." The human fleet surged forward, moving with swift, calculated precision. Their weapons fired in unison, each strike a calculated attempt to tear apart the Empire's ships piece by piece. The Empire's flagship, the dreadnought Elysium, was in their sights, its engines glowing a bright red as it began to turn to engage. "All ships, focus fire on the Elysium," Sarah ordered, her voice hard. "Let's see if we can knock their leader down." The Vanguard, along with the other human warships, poured all their firepower into the Elysium, targeting its weak points with deadly accuracy. Plasma beams and missile salvos lit up the darkness as the Elysium shook under the barrage. "We're hitting them hard," Captain Vance reported, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Their shields are down, but they're still fighting back." Sarah's lips curled into a small, fierce smile. "Let them fight back. We're not done yet." The Elysium returned fire, its massive guns sweeping across the battlefield in an attempt to dislodge the human fleet. But the human ships, agile and unpredictable, danced between the blasts, striking back with speed and precision. The Empire's massive ship was no match for the constant barrage of well-placed fire. Finally, the moment came. A well-placed strike hit the Elysium's engines, sending a cascade of sparks flying as the ship staggered in space. The Elysium was crippled. "We've got their flagship," Lieutenant Ramirez said, awe in his voice. "They're vulnerable." Sarah's gaze never left the tactical map, her focus unshaken. "Keep pushing. We're not stopping now." Empire's retreat. With their flagship disabled, the Empire's fleet faltered. The once proud warships that had once seemed invincible were now falling apart under the pressure of the human assault. The remaining Empire ships, realizing their flagship had been taken down, began to retreat. "They're pulling back," Captain Vance reported, her voice filled with astonishment. "The Empire is retreating." For a moment, Sarah stood motionless, watching as the Empire's fleet turned and began to withdraw from the battlefield. Their arrogance had cost them dearly. The human fleet, battered but still intact, had not only survived the onslaught, they had won. Sarah allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. The Empire had underestimated humanity from the start. They had thought the humans would bow, retreat, or be crushed under the weight of their overwhelming power. But they were wrong. The humans had fought back, not with raw firepower, but with strategy, resilience, and the will to never back down. "It's not over," Sarah whispered to herself. "This is just the beginning." The Empire had retreated for now, but they would be back. And humanity would be ready. "All ships prepare for the next phase," Sarah commanded, her voice steady and resolute. "We've shown them what we're made of. But this is just the first round." The cold vacuum of space was now eerily quiet, the battle's thunderous roar slowly fading into the distance as the Empire's fleet began to retreat. The Empire's warships, once so imposing, now drifted in disarray, their once proud hulls riddled with scorch marks, scars of a battle they had never expected to lose. The massive dreadnought Elysium, the flagship of the Empire, floated ominously in the void, its engines dead, its communication systems in tatters. But despite the damage, it was still there. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. Admiral Sarah Hunt stood at the front of the command center, watching as the last of the Imperial ships disappeared into the dark expanse of space, retreating with all the speed they could muster. Her crew, though battered and exhausted, were still standing, still breathing, still fighting. "We did it," Captain Julia Vance said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "We actually did it. We made them retreat." Sarah said nothing at first, her eyes glued to the tactical map. The human fleet had taken damage. Several warships had been critically damaged, including Vanguard's own shields, which had nearly failed under the Empire's relentless fire. But they had won. They had outsmarted the Empire. And now they had a chance to regroup, to rebuild. But Sarah knew one thing for certain: this battle wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. "We survived," Sarah said quietly, her voice firm. "But we have to stay sharp. This is just one battle in a much bigger war. The price of victory." The crew went to work immediately, repairing what they could, assessing damage, and checking for casualties. The atmosphere in the command center was tense but filled with a quiet, determined energy. No one spoke of the heavy toll the battle had taken, the lost ships, the injured crew, but it was understood. Everyone on board Vanguard had fought to the edge of their limits, and they had emerged victorious. "Admiral," Lieutenant Ramirez said, his voice breaking the silence as he approached with the damage reports. "The fleet has taken some hits, but nothing that will cripple us in the long term. We've got 3 ships in need of full repairs, but the rest are operational. We can continue our mission." Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on the reports. "Good. We keep moving forward. We don't stop just because the Empire ran off with their tails between their legs." "We've made history today, Sarah," Vance said, her voice softer now, as if the weight of their victory was finally sinking in. "This is the kind of thing that people will talk about for centuries. Humanity fought the Empire and won." Sarah turned her head slowly, locking eyes with Vance. "No. We haven't won. Not yet. But we've made our point. The Empire will never look at humanity the same way again." She paused for a moment, her eyes scanning the view beyond the ship, the vast emptiness of space stretching infinitely before them. The aftermath of the battle, a new dawn. Back on Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. News stations, social media, and governments across the galaxy were abuzz with the impossible. Humans had faced the full might of the Galactic Empire and survived. And not just survived, but emerged victorious. The battle was now a symbol of humanity's resilience, a rallying cry to every oppressed system and species under the Empire's rule. Sarah watched as the reports came in, her face expressionless, but inside, a small spark of hope kindled. Humanity had not only survived, they had shown the galaxy that they would no longer be dismissed, no longer be underestimated. The United Earth Federation, the once small power that had fought tooth and nail to gain a foothold in the galaxy, was now the galaxy's most unlikely contender. The Empire, for the first time in centuries, was on the defensive. The balance of power had shifted, even if only slightly. "We're getting messages from several systems," Ramirez said, his voice a mix of awe and excitement. "They're offering support. Some want to join the Federation's cause. Others just want to know how we did it." Sarah smiled faintly. "Let them join. Let them see what happens when you stand up to the Empire." A warning to the Empire. Although the Empire had retreated, their threat was far from over. The loss of the Elysium and the crippling damage to their fleet were not enough to stop them. They would rebuild, they would regroup, and they would return. Sarah knew this. The Empire never forgot a slight, and humanity's challenge to their power had been the ultimate insult. "Admiral," Captain Vance said, her tone serious, "the Empire will come back. They won't take this lightly. We've made a dangerous enemy today." Sarah's face hardened, her eyes sharp with determination. "Let them come. We're ready. And we'll keep getting ready. Humanity is not backing down. We've already proven that." "Are we ready for them?" Vance asked, her voice full of concern. "What if they bring everything they've got next time?" "We don't need to be ready for everything," Sarah replied, her voice steely. "We just need to be ready to outthink them, outmaneuver them. They're big. They're powerful. But they're predictable." She looked out toward the stars, her mind working quickly. The battle had only given them a glimpse of the Empire's true power, but Sarah knew that humanity's greatest strength lay in their ability to adapt. The Empire may have ruled the galaxy for centuries, but the humans were no longer the underdog. They were a force to be reckoned with, A force that could change the course of the galaxy if given the chance. A new beginning. As the human fleet prepared to leave the remnants of the battlefield behind, Sarah stood once more at the bridge, looking out at the empty void before them. The Vanguard had been damaged, but it was still operational, and its crew was intact. That was what mattered. She turned to her crew, her eyes full of resolve. "We've won today. But we'll need more than this if we're going to win the war. We fight smarter, we fight harder, and we never stop moving forward." The crew nodded, understanding the weight of her words. This was just the beginning. The Empire may have retreated, but they would return, stronger and more vengeful than before. But Sarah Hunt had one thing the Empire didn't: the will to keep fighting, no matter the cost. The human fleet moved on, leaving the Empire behind them, for now. "We're not done yet," Sarah said, her voice steady, as she gazed toward the vast unknown. "We've only just begun."